we have three great stacks for you. Our first stack is the Steelers versus the Chiefs. The Chiefs have the worst pass defense in the NFL, and last week the Steelers' passing offense really looked to get better once Landry Jones stepped in for the injured Michael Vick. Martavis Bryant is a great value option after his great performance in Week 6, and Landry Jones could also be a value play here at $5,100. The third matchup I like this week is the primetime game Sunday night between the Panthers and the Eagles. The Eagles have one of the worst secondaries in the NFL, and the Panthers have been playing really well. Cam Newton has been a top 5 fantasy quarterback so far this year, as he is a dual threat and can beat you with both his runs and his passes. Ted Ginn is a really good value play, as he is the best receiver on the Panthers and has the most output. Usually the throws look to go to Greg Olsen, who is going to get a lot of coverage and a lot of attention this week. I think that Ginn could be the value play here, but I like the mixture of Cam Newton and one of the two receivers. This week our bargain bin is kind of thin at the quarterback and running back slots, as many of the teams with the best values are out on buys. This week our top value quarterback is Blake Bortles. The Jaguars have been really solid in the passing game the last 2 weeks, as Blake Bortles has put up 32 and 28 DraftKings points respectively, the tops in the NFL for this 2-week period. This week they match up with Buffalo. I like Bortles' low cost and high production again this week, as the passing game has been really the only thing working for this struggling Jaguars offense. At the running back slot, we like Todd Gurley at $5,000. So far this year, the Rams rookie is averaging over 100 yards per game, which is 13 points right off the bat. He is yet to score, and he doesn't have much value in the passing game, but I like the fact that they trust him with the ball and understand his value to the team. I like him to get into the touchdown category this week. Our second running back pick is Carlos Hyde. At some point in time, this pick will pay off for me. Hyde's price has dropped, and we have seen very few flashes of the dynamic ability that made him Week 1's highest scoring player. This week, they match up with Seattle. It's not a great matchup, but there are limits this week in the value of low-priced running backs. A couple updates to watch at the quarterback and running back position is that Christine Michael is expected to start over Joseph Randle for the Cowboys. This could be a great value play. And Landry Jones is starting for the Steelers, borrowing miraculous return of Ben Roethlisberger. This week we have a lot more depth in our bargain bin at the wide receiver spots. Last week, Rashard Matthews performed very well as a Dolphins secondary receiver. Jarvis Landry gets a lot of attention, and Matthews is usually the beneficiary. He is a big play player, and he usually puts up around 15 points, which is great value for the $4,300 range. Our top value pick this week is Martavis Bryant. He started off his 2015 campaign with a 31-point showing in Week 6. This week they play the Chiefs, the far and away worst passing defense in the NFL. I really like Bryant this week, especially if Big Ben is healthy. But if Landry Jones plays and plays well, Martavis Bryant could be in for a big week anyway. I like Ted Ginn at $3,300 as a roster filler. The Panthers don't have much in the way of receivers, and most targets go to star tight end Greg Olsen. This week they play the Eagles, a team with one of the worst secondaries in football. Ginn is a big play player with a low price and a great matchup. I like him as a fill-in because he allows you to spend more at other positions. Another player like this is Cecil Shorts. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins is the Texans' top target, but Shorts has been valuable. I like his week-by-week production because he gets a lot of targets for his low price. Last week, Stephon Diggs was a monster, and obviously he received a large price upgrade. He is a top target for the Vikings in the passing game, and in this Detroit matchup looks really good. Willie Snead was not the same receiver that has been putting up huge numbers in Week 6. Breeze rarely looked to him, but he did have a few big gainers. I think the play of Watson overshadowed Snead, and I expect him to come up big again in Week 7. This week we have a lot of really solid plays on our high price, high value list. Cam Newton has been one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league so far.
He is a dual threat who puts up huge amounts of points in both the running and passing games. This week they play one of the worst secondaries in football, and I expect a huge game out of Mr. Newton in his matchup against the Eagles on primetime Sunday Night Football. There's no question that Devontae Freeman is now a top 5 running back. Last week it looked as if he was finally going to come back down to earth, but a huge fourth quarter made sure that didn't happen. It looked as if the Saints had figured him out. He hasn't scored under 35 points as a starter, and I expect another monster game against Tennessee this week. His price keeps raising, but I think you should play him until he has one of those outputs, which is below the projection. Phillip Rivers is one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league. Last week it looked as if the Chargers had abandoned the run altogether. Rivers dropped back to pass over 60 times and threw for 500 yards. This week they play Oakland, a poor secondary, and I like Rivers for over 25 DraftKings points again. The real value of DeAndre Hopkins is in his targets. Hoyer looks to him on almost every play. If he continues to get over 15 targets per game, he will become a must-play regardless of price. Brandon Marshall has had a TD and 100 yards in every game of the season except for one. He is a high-production, big-play player, and he is becoming the only big-time receiving threat in the Jets lineup. Greg Olsen. I really like Olsen this week against the Eagles. He has been great for the Panthers this year and is Newton's best receiver. Newton will go to him early and often in the passing game, and he will be involved heavily in the red zone. This week we have 4 tremendous mid-level plays. Allen Robinson had a really strong showing in Week 6 and made it clear that he is Blake Bortles' favorite target. He is emerging as a must-play player, and one thing to watch is that he hurt his leg in Week 6 and left the game. If he is inactive in Week 7 or limited, backup Allen Hurns fits really nicely into this spot because his price is only slightly down and his output is relatively the same. The only difference between Robinson and Hurns' value is the amount of targets. Gary Barnidge has been looked to in the passing game by Hoyer excessively, especially in the red zone. He has been the top fantasy scoring tight end over the past 3 weeks. After 3 consecutive weeks in which he looked like one of the league's best backs, Chris Ivory's price somehow remains below $6,000. I really like Ivory because he is an every down back for the Jets, who need to establish the run in order to open up their passing game. Over the last 2 weeks, Phillip Rivers has looked to Antonio Gates heavily, especially in the red zone. Last week, he looked as if he was going to significantly underplay, but a last-minute drive in which he was looked to 4 times lessened the blow. Overall, Gates is a top fantasy tight end for a mid-level price. This week, we have 3 injury concerns to watch of players that have high values. The blow is really lessened, however, because all 3 players have very easy-to-project backups. First, Allen Robinson. Robinson left the game Sunday with a leg injury. It was later determined that the injury was a significant bruise by the medical staff. He is currently listed as questionable, but I'm leaning towards probable. If he doesn't play or is on a snap count, Allen Hurns fits perfectly into this spot, as his value is nearly the same as Robinson and his targets will be bumped up. Keenan Allen left the game Sunday with a sprained hip. At this point, he is questionable, but all signs are pointing to him playing against the Raiders. Should he be out or limited, Malcolm Floyd becomes an excellent all-around pick because I don't expect Rivers to stop throwing the ball. Last week, he had over 500 yards passing on 60 attempts. Malcolm Floyd's value just jumps tremendously here. The third injury concern is Julian Edelman. His broken finger really did limit his effectiveness against the Colts, especially in the second half. In the first half, he looked poised to have a monster game, but following a big hit on the touchdown play, he never returned to the same level. He is Brady's favorite receiver and has received a pretty hefty price tag in Week 7. I don't think he is the best play this week, and I would definitely stay away. But should he be out or limited, I really like Amendola to fill his spots and be effective in doing so. He's a very similar player who Brady also looks to, but he is significantly less expensive. This week, our optimal lineup is projected at 160.07 points. At the quarterback slot, we have Blake Bortles matching up against Buffalo. His price is really solid, and we like his output over the last few weeks. We're going to ride his hot streak. At the first running back slot, Devontae Freeman. Like I said many times, you need to keep playing the hot player. He hasn't scored under 35 points as a starter, and I don't expect a matchup with Tennessee this week to slow him down. The second running back slot is Chris Ivory against New England. New England has allowed big games to running backs such as D'Angelo Williams this year. Ivory really need to be established in the running game in order for the Jets' offense to open up. He has been one of the best running backs in the league over the last 2 weeks. At the first wide receiver slot, we have DeAndre Hopkins. He's been the highest scoring wide receiver over the last 2 weeks, as he is looked to nearly 20 times a game by Brian Hoyer. This week in a matchup against Miami, I really like him because he gets a lot of targets and a lot of points. The second wide receiver spot is Allen Hurns. Hurns is a really solid value play here, especially if Allen Robinson is hurt. Hurns costs around $5,300, and I like the stack option with Blake Bortles in this lineup. At the other wide receiver spot, we have Stephon Diggs for the Vikings. Last week, he was really good against the Chiefs, and this week, a matchup against a poor secondary in Detroit could lead to more big points. His $4,200 price tag is great considering his value as the number one receiver in the Vikings offense. At the tight end slot, we have Antonio Gates. You could also slide Gary Barnidge into this slot. Antonio Gates, however, matches up with Oakland, and Phillip Rivers threw the ball 60 times last week. The game is at 4:05, so I like the game time. And his $5,000 price tag for 2 games over 18 points and 1 game over 30 is really solid. In the flex spot, we have our top value play, Martavius Bryant. If you look at the projections here, it says it's 25.62. That could be skewed by the fact that he's only played in 1 game and he was really, really solid. But it's also that they're matching up with Kansas City, the worst passing defense in the NFL. With Landry Jones starting and Ben Roethlisberger questionable to come back this week, I really like Bryant as he is one of the best receivers in their offense, and if they look to shut down Antonio Brown, Bryant could be a real beneficiary of a lot of targets. This week we really looked to save money at the defensive spot. The Redskins have our 3rd highest projection among all defenses, and their cost is only $2,500. They match up with Tampa Bay, who is a pretty bad offense, and the only thing Tampa Bay has is a solid running game, as Doug Martin has been really good over the last few weeks. The Redskins have one of the best rush defenses in the NFL, and I expect Jameis Winston to throw at least 1 2 picks.
Thank you for choosing EndZone Strategy for all your daily fantasy needs.